Get started so we can stay on time. So this is technical session 4A. We have two presentations. One's on how big data is helping inform project decisions in Greenville, South Carolina. And then we have another session on Hurricane Helene lessons learned. So we're going to start with the big data. And I've got three speakers for this. I'm going to introduce them all, and then they'll work amongst themselves. So Graham Malone is HDR's South Carolina Traffic Engineering Section Lead. He has been working in the engineering consulting industry for 15 years. His career includes experience in traffic engineering, traffic safety, transit system operations, freeway and interchange design, transportation planning, and community master planning. He has served on various industry organization committees, including ACEC's South Carolina Traffic Subcommittee, Southern District's ITE's Communication and Outreach Committee, and even the Georgia IT Winter Workshop Committee when he lived in Atlanta years ago, when we actually worked together years ago. Let's see, he holds a bachelor's and master's in civil engineering from Clemson University and currently lives in Charleston, South Carolina with his wife, Sarah, his son, Charlie, and his beagle, Gus. Next, we have Andrew Ritter. Andrew is the traffic engineer at HDR for over 13 years. He specializes in advanced traffic modeling and development of alternate intersections. His skill set spans traffic operations, capacity studies, simulation, alternative intersections and roadway design, transit signal priorities, and large data analytics. Andrew has a bachelor's degree in the University of Florida and is a member of the board of the North Carolina section of ITE. Next, we have Brian St. George. And Brian is Georgia's traffic and planning section lead and has been with HDR for over 10 years. He specializes in operational analysis utilizing macro, micro, and mesoscopic modeling tools. Sorry, I should have kept that on one page. Particularly in congested roadways and intersections requiring innovative intersections. He has overseen traffic and safety work on various interchange access requests and PD&E studies throughout Florida, providing traffic analysis support for projects in Las Vegas, Nevada, and is that Cairns, Queensland, Australia? Cairns?
I'm not sure.
But in Australia, that's pretty cool. Pretty sure they drive on the wrong side of the road there, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Big project.
And he also is regional planning support in the United Arab Emirates. Brian holds a bachelor's and a master's degree in civil engineering from the University of Florida. I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to our session today. This morning, we want to talk about two projects that we completed for the city of Greenville that utilize big data as well as advanced microsimulation modeling in order to help the city with their decision-making processes. So the two projects that we're going to talk about today are along College Street in the orange and Stone Avenue in the purple. We are actually right here. So if you drove in to the conference, you probably had to go onto College Street in order to get over here. So the project is actually starting over at Main Street at that intersection over there. A little bit of background before we get into these studies, though. We back in 2019 helped the city with a downtown transportation master plan with the focus of helping move traffic through the downtown area more efficiently. A big component of that was looking at the one-way pair between College Street and North. They act as eastbound, westbound one-way pairs. And if we could somehow make those move a little bit more efficiently through downtown core, the downtown core. We used in that master plan, we looked at streetlight origin destination data to see where are people coming from, where are they going to, and how are they using the various roadways through Greenville to move around. And with that study, we saw that College Street actually has operating a little bit under capacity. It's underutilized. So there is an opportunity or potential opportunity for us to do a road diet along here and maybe more aligned with some of the city's kind of vision for the downtown area. So with that, moving from the master plan, with the city wanted to move forward with a road diet study, which they were calling the cultural corridor. And this was going to be from Main Street and 3 blocks west over to the Heritage Green Cultural Center. And what they envisioned for this would be reduce a lane and then be able to provide pedestrian and bicycle accommodations on both sides of that corridor. So College Street as it is today, if you can see behind me, it's a 4-lane roadway heading westbound through downtown. And it serves trips both pass through the downtown area, as well as for a lot of commuter trips. There's a lot of businesses and office space down here. Just a little bit east of us are the Liberty Square Towers, which employ a lot of people. So it sees both the commuter traffic and the pass-through trips. We also saw as part of this study that there are a lot of sideswipe crashes along this corridor as well. And that's typically due to it being 4 lanes, one direction, and a lot of people trying to make their lane changes for the appropriate turn as they're traveling down the corridor. So again, the goal of this study was to be able to connect the downtown area over to the cultural center over at Heritage Green. And that would be providing improved travel for vehicular traffic, as well as the pedestrian and bicycle accommodations. And this project was to be paired with, I'll go back, this blue line here for Academy Street. We didn't want to see a lane reduction on College without seeing some type of, if there could be improvements on Academy that might be able to help divert some of the traffic and relieve some of the traffic that would be seen on College Street itself. So we, in our analysis, we also included Academy Street to in our modeling. So how do we use big data for this study? We went back to our OD analysis that we used for the 2019 master plan and looked at, again, how are people moving through downtown? How are they traveling? Where are they coming from and going through? So we can see here, if you're starting off to the west, off to the east and heading west, about 56% of the traffic doing those kind of trips are utilizing College. And only 6% were utilizing Academy as just pass-through trips. So what we wanted to do was, what can we do to make Academy Street more attractive to help with that diversion of traffic from College to Academy? So in order to do that, we were using our OD analysis as well as our microsimulation. And I'll have Andrew talk about the microsim program we use for this.
Yeah, because big data, it's great. It'll tell you that it's a project might be feasible, but to see if it actually works. Too many times? No, we're good. We wanted to use some microsimulation because microsimulation allowed us to find where traffic would end up routing to, and then also be able to utilize its capabilities to then figure out how we could improve that relocation onto Academy. And so the program we decided on over Visum, over Ansem, was Transmodeler. Now, who here actually has ever heard of Transmodeler as a microsim? Ooh, a lot more than I thought. Coming out of North Carolina, that's all we use. And I love its capabilities because it's got built-in OD development, which then when we tied that with the streetlight data, really made a really easy way to develop the origin destination matrices. Then you got the built-in dynamic traffic assignment, which allowed us, when you did that lane reduction, to really just be able to reuse that OD matrix, but then see where the traffic ended up. And then the built-in signal optimization was really nice because Visum, it's great, but it's so hard to coordinate signals unless if you're using like a Synchro or a Bistro. And so along with it, so this one just kind of gave us that all-in-one model to really kind of create an efficient way to look and see where traffic might reroute. And so we included all of the downtown core, as you can see here on the right side of the screen, that then allowed us to assess where people might go, whether it's Academy or whether it's down to Washington on the southern side or anywhere in between. And that big data that we collected initially was then able to be reused and kind of validate what we were seeing. So the micro simulation that we did, we really wanted to answer the three questions here. What are the impacts of the project when we did it? Could we make Academy Street more desirable? And then what improvements may be required to really keep traffic moving? And so we did a lot of the microsim work, just doing a quick things where we deleted the lane, made small tweaks to signal timings, and then did the larger improvements like working in, okay, extra lanes or lengthening turn lanes or just changing the paint striping. And so what we ended up finding was that there's 4 really easy low-hanging fruit opportunities to improve Academy Street and really start getting that traffic to shift and not really experience too much extra travel time. So starting on the right side here, and we'll work counterclockwise. So coming into the town, there was just a single right turn lane onto Academy. And so that was an easy low-hanging fruit where we could add in a shared right turn, and suddenly we increased that capacity even more. And we extended the left turn lane then at the next intersection because we were seeing some queuing going on that then impeded the through traffic being able to keep going around in a bypass fashion. So extending some of those really then helped things. And then retiming just that corridor and making it actually coordinated along Academy Street for a change really then pushed traffic through really well so that we could get them up and around and reconnect with North Street, College Street on the other side. And then there was another signal on the far west side of town that just wasn't really warranted anymore. So we made that recommendation to pull them out. And all of this really isn't too big of a set of projects to where it's now already in place as the construction work is going on. And so with that,
So, yeah, so as Andrew mentioned, and as we've already talked about, the project is under construction and it's expected to be completed this year. And again, those other projects along Academy Street that Andrew mentioned were kind of more rapid response type projects. They were smaller in scale. But they have been implemented and were implemented prior to breaking ground on the cultural corridor project itself, so that there was a viable bypass ready and available during MOT conditions for the main project. Project will also make upgrades to other elements, so it's not just adding additional landscaping and sidewalk and pedestrian space. It's also upgrading traffic signals. The signal right here has been modified. The 2 other signals along the route are being completely rebuilt, so there'll be brand new infrastructure there. There'll be new fiber optic communications between those signals to help the city grow their network. And kind of a parallel to this, and prior to Academy Street's signal retiming, we had to really establish more coordination and more communication on that corridor. So the city worked in partnership with SCDOT, kind of a parallel to add wireless radio communications and expand their downtown grid networks. That had to be done prior to any kind of retiming. I think the city's TMC has also been very instrumental in being able to maintain and keep timing plans on Academy Street functioning. There will be things like leading pedestrian intervals at the signal. So that's a citywide initiative in the downtown core to add, a few extra seconds of green time to pedestrian crosswalks to help, improve visibility of pedestrians and give them some more time to get across intersections prior to starting vehicle traffic. And we've already mentioned the pedestrian cycle space present. So it's a very exciting project. It really kind of brings, the city's vision for downtown, which is, slower streets, promoting business, promoting walkability, all the things that people know and love Greenville for. It's bringing this one block further north and helping expand that and turn what College Street used to be into something that's more aligned with what the city has in plan. So the next project we will talk about is Stone Avenue, and it's the purple line here. This project's been around for a while, but it was initiated a little bit later than the coastal corridor efforts. And a lot of the reasons why the project is being even examined has to do with safety. There's a lot of reports from people that live off of the road, people that drive it on a daily basis. There are a lot of businesses that have businesses and storefronts on Stone Avenue itself. There are a lot of reported near miss crashes and actual crashes happening. And there's also congestion. It's a heavily traveled road. So there's a lot of features and a lot of elements that are at play here, even down to the characteristics of the road itself. And so what the city and HDR were looking at with Stone Avenue are focusing on safety improvement. So how can we make the intersections that are already there safer? It is a constrained corridor. There's not a lot of room to expand and widen and even build turn lanes. It's very challenging in that corridor to build anything outside of the existing roadway footprint. So we were trying to identify opportunities to improve the corridor without completely rebuilding. It is a 4-lane undivided route on US 276, and it is undivided for most of its stretch. There are some left turn lanes, especially as you get over towards 385. It does widen out, and you do have some left turn lane at certain intersections and locations there. But along the kind of the denser area that's growing and developing and changing, there are numerous driveways without any left turn capability. So you're making a left turn from a through lane to a driveway, and you sometimes are having to do that with an opposing person turning left as well. And that can lead to issues where there's lockups because you can't see past the other car who's waiting to turn left. People get impatient. People start making risky moves, and that leads to those near miss and those crashes that were being reported. We did eventually, through our analysis, identify that there was an elevated crash rate for the corridor. And as I mentioned, we looked at improvement options, including a lane reduction. That's important. It's a 4-lane road. One of the, sometimes obvious solutions for this is to take a 4-lane road, it's undivided, and remove a lane or two and, make it a 2-lane road with a center median. And that was one of the things that we were going to be examining with this project. So again, we went back to street light because we had success with it in the downtown master plan and the cultural corridor project. And if you don't know what street light data is, it is really just a data analytics platform, subscription-based platform, and it uses cell phone data and other freight data to aggregate massive amounts of information into condensed visualization tools. So you can really start to get information about trips via time of day, time of year, day of the week, directionality. And so what we were able to do with this is we had a couple of kind of key things that we were looking at. We were looking at a middle filter analysis. We were looking at origin, destination, regional trips. And then we were also wanting to establish generalized origin destination pairs for the building of the microsimulation model, which Andrew will talk about. The origin destination of the regional trips is kind of illustrated here in this upper left corner. And it's hard to tell, but Stone Avenue is like right in here. And what this is telling us is this is looking at, the trip ends for traffic using Stone Avenue. So as you might expect, there are high concentrations of trips either beginning or ending right near the corridor. Those are the people that live there. But then, as we suspected, there's quite a bit of trips that are heading to the northwest, towards Travelers Rest and Furman University, and then, along 385, which is hard to see, but kind of to the south and southeast, the airport, suburban Greenville is that way. And so, we really kind of use this to validate the idea that this is a regional corridor, and that we should be treating it as such. And then here's another visualization, just as in another representation. You can get this information out of Streetlight as well. It just kind of shows you the routes, the highest used routes for traffic that are moving through there. These are more refined, more granular origin destination visualizations, and these are just 2 examples that I pulled. But what this is showing you is this is 385 here in the east. This is Poinsett Highway here to the northwest. And what we're looking at here is what are the predominant routes that people are taking to go between these two locations? And you can really see with the weight of the line, Stone Avenue is the most frequent route chosen. The second most frequent route is this yellow line here, which is Pleasantburg Drive. And then there were some also people that we saw taking College Street, Cultural Corridor. But by and large, we're seeing Stone Avenue as the highest used road. This is a similar example, but it's a different trip pair. This is Pete Hollis Boulevard over kind of more to the general west of downtown to 385. And what you see here is people are actually using College Street more often. There's less people using Stone. So we're kind of starting to get a picture of like where within the city are people going? How are they using Stone? We developed a kind of a matrix of, dominant OD pairs, but these are major origin and destination locations that use Stone. We used that previous slide and the features of the big data platform to identify this and develop this. And this column here is just the proportion of those trips. So if we knew how many trips were being made on a daily basis between point A and point B, we could then quantify how many people were using Stone Avenue. We could also quantify how many of the trips on Stone Avenue are based on this actual trip pair. So in this case here, 385 to Poinsett Highway, like I was showing on the previous slide, you have about 60% of the total trips making that daily pattern using Stone. The other 40% are using either Pleasantburg Road or some other means. And then about just under 7% of the trips on Stone Avenue are making that, are there because of that origin destination pair. So when we concluded this, we found that there was about a little less than 40% of the traffic on Stone Avenue had the potential to divert to another road. So either, Pleasantburg to the north or some of the downtown grid, south of Stone, which is a lot, but that is the potential. We need to remember that's the potential diversion. Then we kind of started thinking about, well, what's the Stone Avenue ADT? I mean, it was 35,000 cars a day. That's a lot of traffic. We were going to have to move 30 to 35% off of Stone Avenue or have a place for it to displace to be able to realistically and reasonably say that a lane reduction on that road would work. And when we started seeing those numbers, we very quickly realized that we're going to have to really move every single person off of Stone that's currently using it to get from point A to point B. They're going to have to displace somewhere else. And that to us told us that that was a very high benchmark to try to achieve. And we started kind of thinking that, the lane reduction, we still want to explore it, but we are starting to kind of realize that it is a pretty daunting task to be able to move 40% of the traffic off of that road.
So we went back in and pulled out the same stuff we were doing for Academy Street. We thought, okay, let's really try to see if Transmodeler can get us to that point, because there was a chance, even if it was slim, that we could make this work if we could make some of these other routes attractive. So that's when we pulled back out of the hat. We pulled out our Academy Street model where we had the downtown and grew it out to really explore all of kind of North Greenville here. And so we used our Transmodeler network, and the red line there is our Stone Avenue. Everything kind of southwest of that is the downtown model we originally had, but then we blew it out going to the northeast. And basically that gave us all those multiple routing options to reuse and see if we could get that attraction to any of the other roadways. And so when we did that, looked at those pretty much the same three questions that we had of what are the impacts if we do this? Are the other routes at all desirable? Because the other thing to remember is we also had Academy Street here and the College Street work going on at the same time, where we didn't want to blow this area up by then fixing Stone Avenue too, and just kind of shifting the problem back to downtown, which was already a problem. So we really needed that outer loop of Pleasantburg Road to really be the attractive route. And so we started doing that, and we started running the models, and nobody moved. Even they were willing to sit through that congestion rather than relocate to that Pleasantburg, which it's congested, but it's not Stone Avenue congested when we take away a lane. And so we kind of had to start re-looking at it because this was our findings. There's nothing. Because at the end of the day, uh-oh, what did I push? Aha, good. At the end of the day, what we were finding is this big desert in the middle was our problem. There isn't a great network that brought us through here. But we still actually wanted to improve stuff along Stone because, as you heard, there's safety issues here. And so that's when we then, okay, we reuse that model, even though it wasn't working to show us that we could divert and actually do that lane reduction. We started looking in at ways that what can we do to actually make it work without actually impacting traffic. And so that's when we started looking at, okay, let's look at left turn lanes. Can we remove some of those and keep people from turning left in some of those businesses and reuse some of the internal network nearby to get people to divert and come back around? And so that's when we did some internal modeling there and started seeing, okay, there is potential here. We could actually do some safety improvements and keep traffic flowing because Stone Avenue is regionally significant, but we also want to make sure the locals have an enjoyable time and a safe time at it. So, Brian, what did you find?
Yeah, so in parallel to the traffic analysis, HDR, the city, and South Carolina DOT District 3 were conducting a road safety audit along the road too. So a lot of the recommendations that are presented at the conclusion of the study have to do with the road safety audit itself. And so when we're looking, we're talking about things like, improving and increasing no right turns on red. We're looking at things like perhaps time of day restrictions on left turn functionality. It's traffic signals to help reduce that left turn lockup that could happen that's been reported. Converting some of the protected, permitted left turn phases to protected only. There's an existing mid-block crosswalk that was used by school children that was had a flashing beacon, but it wasn't actuated. It was just a continuously flashing beacon with some warning signs that would be updated and upgraded to a pedestrian hybrid beacon to help with that. Some much needed improvement. The community was really interested in that. And then there are some additional capacity and adjustments to some of the key intersections that have been made. I think the key safety factor, the key safety motivator that we're looking at now is we don't think that a lane reduction is viable. We don't want to push traffic to the next block to the north, which is a residential street. We don't want to push traffic to the next block south, which is Park Avenue, which is also residential. It's already a cut through today for some people, and we did not want to make that worse. And so things like those left turn restrictions during those peak times through dynamic messaging signs are things that would be explored. The project is still working its way through the public involvement process. So these recommendations will eventually go to public and stakeholders for comment, and we'll conclude recommendations in 2025 once we have received feedback through the stakeholder engagement effort.
So we've walked through two projects that we've worked in Greenville, but what can we take away from these projects? What are some of the conclusions that we can glean from all of this? And one is just the use of big data in sort of a planning level review of these projects. In both cases, we were able to look at the OD data from Streetlight and see, in the case of College Street, that a lane reduction along there is a viable option because of the amount of traffic that is utilizing that roadway. But for Stone, because of its regional significance, we could see that that was going to be a little bit more of an uphill task to try to go through with this lane reduction along that street. So even before we get into any kind of microsimulation or analysis, we can look at a high level with big data, some of the planning components to it, and if it's even a viable or feasible option for this. And then that leads to, when we do get into the microsimulation, we can really focus our efforts. So with the OD data, we knew what the routes were and what they weren't. So we could then model those routes instead of just modeling everything. We could be a little bit more selective about what we're doing, which can lead to a little bit more efficiency with the modeling, as well as some cost savings as well when you get into that modeling. And then between the two, we had two very different conclusions at the end of all of this, even though we went through the same process and the same methodology through all of this, used the same kind of information. It really came down to the location of these roadways and what their significance were to Greenville and who used them. Again, with Stone or with College Street, we saw where we could use a bypass with Academy Street. We were able to take trips off of College and move them. But with Stone, there was that desert of additional parallel nearby routes that could absorb some of that rerouted traffic. They didn't have that in that area, whereas the downtown area was a fairly established grid network that could kind of take on some of those extra trips. So the last bit is that I know we use this data all the time whenever we have to present to the public or we have to present to agencies, but using some of the OD maps that Graham showed, or just microsimulation animation, all of these are great tools to bring to the public. They're great tools to bring to just any client or anyone and show this is where we're getting our data from, and we can actually visualize it. And it goes so much further when trying to explain or get a point across to anybody, especially people who aren't in the industry and may need a little bit more of that visualization or a little bit of help of understanding what it is we're trying to explain. So this is just great tools to use in any of those types of environments. And with that, we'll hold questions to the end, but our contact information is up here. So any questions, reach out to us and we'd be happy to talk more. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. So our next speaker is Valerie Holmes. Valerie is a native of Greenville, South Carolina, and graduated with a degree in civil engineering from Clemson University. She began her transportation career at FDOT's in their PE program in Fort Lauderdale. After receiving her PE in 1999, Valerie continued her career with FDOT until 2003, when she returned to Greenville and joined URS Corporation for 5 years. Valerie has been employed with the city of Greenville in the traffic engineering department since 2008, when she was hired as the traffic operations engineer. In 2014, Valerie was promoted to the position of assistant city engineer, where she remains today. She supervises a staff of 17 employees who are responsible for maintaining the city's traffic signal system, as well as street signs, pavement markings, and street lighting. Valerie is proud to oversee the construction of the city's new traffic management center, which opened in September of 2024. Valerie?
Good morning. I am pleased to present our response to Hurricane Helene. Now, as obviously everyone is aware, we did have, she struck back in September. There we go. What people don't know, and I'll get to it here in just a second on a slide. 3 days before, we had a microburst downtown. So we had a double whammy. And at the time, the city maintained 207 signals. I've since added about another 8. So we're through annexation and that sort of thing. As was mentioned, I have a staff, 17 people plus myself, 13 field crews plus operations and administration. And again, as was mentioned, our TMC had opened just on September 3rd, whereas Helene struck on September 27th. And another point, we had at the time 18 generators, little portable suitcase generators, which will inform the story later on. So again, we had a microburst downtown. It knocked out probably about a dozen signals. It uprooted quite a few trees in the CBD. It was really limited to the downtown area. And I had one person on call at the time He was brand new, had never responded to a weather event like this. So he was caught off guard. He had to call some help in, but we got it done. But this is just some examples of the damage that we sustained, and my traffic operations manager commented how powerful it must have been to rip a signal off of an astro bracket on a mast arm. So it was a pretty powerful microburst. We had fiber optic cable damage along one of the major corridors, Church Street, for those of you who are familiar with the area. And again, we had several down trees around town. So again, Helene hit 27. About sunrise, I was actually getting ready to go to work. I hit my garage door opener at 6:20. And as it was 2/3 of the way up, I lost power at my house. So I couldn't get my car out of the garage. So I released the garage door, put it down, and went inside and waited for the storm to, let up just a little bit. Well, it probably hit in full force maybe an hour and a half later. So I found out speeds were at 68 miles an hour measured at GSP. I think there were higher speeds elsewhere, but that's the official tally, and we had as much as 11 inches of rain. Again, at the time, our TMC was only 3.5 weeks old. We had just opened. We were still working out the bugs in the system. Fortunately, we did have the emergency generator for that building that was operable pretty much the entire time. We didn't have a whole lot of issues with that, but our functionality out of the TMC was quite limited. So we were not able to use that to our advantage to the greatest extent that we would have liked. So the storm passed about noon, sun came out, and I'm standing there at the office thinking this can't be real. Just a few hours ago, it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. I think Greenville, the upstate, took the brunt of the wind. Unfortunately, as we all know, Asheville and Western North Carolina got the water. And I just can't imagine the devastation that they encountered up there. So I think, we kind of got off a little bit better. So if we could just remember our friends in North Carolina. So again, we had in our inventory, we had 18 portable generators. And that is part of our emergency response. Generally speaking, when a signal goes out, we are asked to deploy a generator. I know, apologies to Ben, DOT generally doesn't like it, but the expectation of leadership and management is that our signal system is always working. This is the kind of thing, we have battery backup throughout the city. However, it's only rated to run about 3 hours, and we were without power at most of our signals for about a week. So we had to do something. So we had developed a plan to basically, which intersections are we going to send these 18 generators to? And for anyone who's ever done that, that's a lot of generators to manage. Again, our signal system being over 200 signals, we had to pick the most critical ones. But wait. Sunday or Saturday morning, the 28th, after the storm had passed, I had gotten word that our city manager and the fire chief were able to procure another 50 generators. Hence the wait, what? Which was my reaction when my boss told me that we were getting another 50 generators. So that really tilted everything into high gear as far as the traffic engineering staff. How are we going to manage 68 generators around town? It really was an unbelievable feat. And I have to give credit to my crews because everyone stepped up. Not that they really had a choice. So that day, because there were so many power outages citywide, there was really no way for us to tell without actually getting out into the field and looking at it, how many signals were operable. And in a twist of irony, Helene really didn't affect the CBD all that much, but the microburst did. So we were in pretty bad shape citywide. We did determine that about 67% of our signals were without power. And as you can see here, we had one intersection that was actually destroyed completely. Old growth trees had just fallen and taken the signal down. So Saturday into Saturday night, working from home, I developed what we call the plan. What are now our most 68 critical intersections to address with the generator power. Be honest with you, nobody up here would really expect to get hit with a hurricane. I mean, Florida, yes. Upstate South Carolina, aside from Hugo, not really something that you would expect. So admittedly, we did not have a plan in place. We have a plan in place now. Didn't really have any set criteria. It was more, I hate to say it, gut feeling, geometry of the intersection. What are our larger intersections? What are the intersections that carry the most traffic? Those were really the ones that we targeted. It was a lot of institutional knowledge, talking to my folks, saying, hey, what do you think? And so that's really how we prioritized. And then aside from just the generators, which were coming in, how are we going to secure them? We had to get chains and locks. We had, for our 18 generators, one fuel can, because we don't generally deploy all 18 at once. It's one or two, you only need one fuel can. Well, 68, you need a whole lot more fuel cans. How are we going to get fuel supplied? We had to get oil till they were fresh out of the box. Had to get oil for these. Some of our locations have what we call transfer switches, which allows you outside the cabinet to open up the little door, plug the generator in, and close it and turn it, and you flip a breaker, and now it's on generator power. A lot of our intersections did not have that, so the generators had to be wired directly into the cabinet. That took some creativity. We had to basically fabricate immediately our generator extension cords, and then getting the manpower to have, all these generators serviced during the duration of the power outage. So by Sunday, it was all hands on deck. My guys plus the entire engineering department with the city. We came down to about 8 teams with 3 to 4 people each. And this picture here that's the map of our citywide network as far as streets. We didn't have signals noted on it, but I know it's kind of difficult to see, but that's what we refer to as our artwork in our break room. It was just a map that really just was artwork. But we made use of that to figure out, okay, where are these 68 intersections? Where are they? And so we took little sticky notes and little green dots. Okay, here, 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 and here. And then we figured out, where did everybody live? The people who were going to be on the teams, where did they actually live? And so the yellow Post-it notes are those teams. Okay, we got some people coming in from the east. They're going to be assigned these intersections, and people from the west will have these intersections. We didn't want people driving across town to, initially when we had all these intersections out. So that's how we assign the teams, and that's how we basically assign them to their locations. So the generators, they arrived around 10 o'clock Sunday night, and everyone was there ready to unbox. We had our cords. Basically, it was a 3-wire. The power cords were 3-wire, 14 gauge that just because the power was out, we could disconnect Duke Power and put in on the terminal block. Just wired in. Fortunately, we had a master electrician also on staff who helped us out with that. So anyway, so now we're into Monday. I had put together, okay, this group is going to have this many intersections. I made the teams responsible for determining what is your fueling schedule going to be, because you have to delegate in a situation like this. One person cannot do it all. So we established teams. Team captains were named. I left it up to them to determine their fueling schedule. We were on 24/7, about 4 refuelings per day. And so every time I would get a status. We had 3 updates to management and leadership every single day. So what they did was, I told them, and this was important, text me everything. Do not call me. Do not tell me. I will forget. Please text me. And I had to make sure that each team was texting me separately, because if everyone's on the same text thread and you have to reply, who are you replying to? It gets confusing. That way, yes, it's a lot of text for me, but it keeps it easier for everybody else because you are now only responding to individual teams and people know what it's who is being directed to. So that was a critical thing. And every refueling shift, I would get an update, and we explained and understand a lot of these, they're engineers, they're not traffic engineers, so they didn't really fully understand the cabinets and the innards and the workings and that sort of thing. So we had to explain, look at the power meter when you go to refuel. If you find that the power meter has a display on this little LCD display, if there's anything on it, there's power to that meter. Even if it doesn't make sense, if it's just garbled, it still has power. So let me know, and we can come along, disconnect it, and get it back up and running on regular Duke power. So that was something else I had to keep track of, is when things came back online, what was still dark. Tracking the locks and keys, that was another interesting tidbit that we had to deal with. My guys, they had one key for all of our padlocks, okay? Because you don't want to keep up with a whole bunch of keys. Well, we were given, 3 packs of master locks that came with 2 keys total for 3 locks, which didn't make sense. And none of the engineers, none of the non-traffic staff had keys to our locks. So we had American lock and key for ours that were all keyed the same. And then I had about, 4 or 5 different key types for these master locks. So that was another challenge. So I had to make sure that only traffic staff took the single keyed locks, and everyone else, they had a key that they had to keep up with. Well, how are we going to do that? Told them, hide it in the police panel. Do not walk away from that cabinet with a key in your hand, because the next person that comes along is not going to have it. So we hid the keys. We opened up the police panel. We gave them keys to the police panel, but then that's where we hid the keys to the locks. I made sure that when I got a text message, I would like it. I would just do the little like on the text so that they would know that I got it and that I would know I had acknowledged it. Text messaging saved all of us. So then as signals came online and I got notified and they were now off generator and we had all these spare generators, I kept a running list. What's still dark? What has a generator on it? And what, is operating normally. And so as I was constantly reprioritizing, okay, when this comes online, where are we going to send that generator to? Here's our next one in line. So it's basically a game of whack-a-mole is what we were playing with, all these generators, moving them all around town, trying to make sure that as many as 68 were operational. So yes, okay. Refueling, 5-gallon gas can, like not going to last you very long when you have like 7 to 10 generators. So county EOC fire department, they had a 50-gallon fuel truck with a big tank on the back that they were gracious enough to loan us. So we had that tank, we had that truck at traffic engineering. The county EOC had a centralized refueling station that I had one person, that was his job, was to make sure that gas truck was always full. And we didn't make people come in to use the gas truck. Said, if it's easier just to go to a gas station and they have gas, fill your gas cans up at a gas station, just save the receipts. So again, we had the daily updates to management 3 times a day. And this is kind of an example of a text message that I would send. I would cut and paste from other text messages into new ones, giving my boss, here's the latest list. This is what's come online since the last update. So then I would do a little tally at the bottom. I say this because I still have not deleted this text thread. I don't save text. It's just how I operate. I have not yet deleted this because I keep referring back to it for some reason or another. So hold on to the texts. Heavy use of OneNote and Excel. OneNote makes it very easy just to move from one column to another. Excel, great for filtering when you need to. During the process, we actually had 3 generators that became inoperable. They just stopped working. And we had 10 stolen over the course of the week and a half-ish that we were doing this. And to top it all off, there was an area, pretty important area that the city was getting ready to annex in, but had not yet at the time, called Cherrydale. 6 intersections surrounding Cherrydale, and 1 intersection out that fortunately we didn't have to really worry about. But those were DOT-owned intersections. And again, apologies to DOT. We had to get them up and running because they were highly trafficked routes, and we had to get the signals running. So we had those 6 added to our rotation, which is way, way out there. So people ask, you have all those generators, where do you store them? This is a gift from our fire department, big 3-axle trailer. That's where we store our generators now because we're keeping them on hand. That was an interesting situation to bring it in. I don't know if you can tell right behind it, there's a chain link fence. So that 5th wheel is up against the fence so nobody can just come in, hook it up and drive off with a trailer load of generators. They had to turn it around 180 degrees with the forklift. I didn't witness that, but it would have been interesting. In any case, so that's where we store our generators now in the event that hopefully we don't have another Helene. But this is kind of a summary of the power restoration. Like I said, 29th, we had determined that about 2/3 of our signals were down. So the green bars are restoration. When do we have power come back on? So we started at about 33%. By October 8th, we were at 100%. That was an interesting, the lone holdout was, it was on a corridor, Haywood Road, that had been working. All the rest of the signals on Haywood Road were working except for this one location. Couldn't figure out why. So we go out there and we put in a call to Duke Energy saying, our signal is dark. The signal is not working. They would go out, look at it, turning red, yellow, green. It must be working because it was on a generator. They did not stop to get out of the car to look that a tree had actually fallen on the power line and was not feeding power to the meter. They just saw that the light was changing, and so power must be there. So we probably could have had 100% by the 6th or the 7th, but get out of your truck and look, please. So in any case, so lessons learned. Like I said, never expected anything like this. So have a plan in place. We ended up prioritizing, went through, now we're applying criteria. What are our major corridors? What are our routes to important infrastructure, hospitals, schools, things like that? We ended up sidelining, I didn't mention earlier, but it was on the slide. Our 18 generators were different brands. We had 6 each of Hondas, Yamahas, and Furmans. The Yamahas were okay. Those were 2 of the ones that burned up, but the Furmans did not last as long. So we were really only looking at like a 5-hour cycle instead of 6 to 8 that the Hondas were allowing us. So it threw our schedule off. And then you have to worry about, well, who's got a combination of these different generators, and they're going to be on different fueling schedules. And so we just sidelined the ones that were not working out for us. And so we're standardizing our equipment to be all Honda generators. One thing that we did not do, and this was on me, but we did not take the time to record the serial numbers of the generators. I was expecting maybe a bill of lading or a shipping slip that came with the delivery because they were delivered directly to traffic engineering. That did not happen. They just basically showed up, 50 generators were offloaded and they left. That's how, that's just how it happened. And our singular focus was getting those generators unboxed, gassed, oiled, started, and deployed. Nobody's thinking about serial numbers. Well, FEMA thinks about serial numbers. So take the time if you know any critical equipment, make sure you have all your serial numbers noted. And also the theft of the generators. When you have a police report, they want serial numbers. Can't tell you what they are because they're stolen. But what we have done is recently I did some research. We are procuring GPS trackers for these generators. So we'll actually open up the case, stick it inside and then close it up. And hopefully nobody will be smart enough to open up the generator to see that we're actually tracking it. But that is something that, we can do to help mitigate for future theft. Again, save all of your information, make notes. This is a very quick presentation because a lot of what happened is still up here, and I hope to receive a lot of questions about it. And then at the end, schedule a debrief with your staff as quickly as possible and try to get all of this down on paper as soon as you can, because eventually you will forget it. So, and then use that to inform your SOPs. And that's all I have. My contact information is on the City of Greenville's website if you need it. So with that.
All right, thank you. That's all. Do you have any questions?
Big data process, like, do you all have a threshold or a specific process to like?
So I think that's a good question. I think a lot of it has to do with, in the early scoping stages of the project, or if perhaps we're, exploring it as a proposal, we may decide that this is a project that would call for something like big data. I mean, I think that there's we would probably advocate using it if there were, in the case of Stone Avenue, a need to understand like where people might go if they didn't have the opportunity or the availability to use a particular road. So that would be one instance where I would say that that would be very useful. I mean, anytime you're making any kind of major changes to, a network, a road network, I think that it's important to do that. Some other times, we might think that it would be useful, like what Andrew uses it for in those micro simulation models, is building his origin and destination matrix. If we've got a larger network, we think it's going to require some kind of simulation. I think that would be. It is kind of case by case.
Was there any kind of reflection back when the discrepancy between the data you were giving? Obviously you're not using it for specific training, but not giving percentages of where people are traveling.
Yes, so we can't know for, the Streetlight has done their work to quote unquote validate their results. So there's a little bit of, kind of understanding that, and they do publish and they are transparent with that information, but there is some level that we kind of have to accept as, what they are doing in their post-processing is accurate and correct. We will look at things like ADT versus what the corridor says in Streetlight, and we try to report things in terms of, like you saw, percentages. So we don't want to necessarily go out there and report hard numbers when we're using something like Streetlight, because traffic's variable. And they're using, and what they're even doing is imprecise. But that's kind of how we combat that a little bit. I've actually done some work just to validate local Streetlight information. It wasn't a Greenville project, it was something in Columbia, but it was during COVID actually, and we weren't able to get traffic counts. And we had the idea of like, well, let's try to use Streetlight. Can we use Streetlight as like a stand-in? And so we kind of did our own little white paper analysis, kind of mimicking some of the work that they do with a few other elements, to try to validate, are we getting results from streetlight that we would expect to get from a traffic count? And I think we confirmed that it was reasonable and reliable enough. So, I mean, we kind of are always asking that question, but.
Maybe one more.
Did you consider remote shift at all when you're looking at multiple lane reduction?
I mean, to some degree, I mean, we didn't implement any kind of defined mode shift in these because, we're trying to be conservative and understanding that, or something like Stone Avenue, if it is a regional trip that we're trying to displace, the likelihood of getting someone into another mode of transportation where there may not be an established route, from Greenlink or something serving that same trip fare, it kind of becomes, not challenging, but we wouldn't consider that a major factor. Something like that.
I got one question for Valerie. So on your chart, you had like 99% of your signals were back up. And so I assumed that the one that wasn't was the one that got totally destroyed. And you said it wasn't, it was one where the power wasn't getting there. So,
No, I was discounting that one.
okay, so how long did it take you to at least get?
That signal, DOT rebuilt it for us very quickly. We had it. Ben, help me out. How was
We already had,
3 weeks?
yeah, we already had everything on site from it, so we just contacted the guy.
Yeah, it was about 3 weeks before. And interestingly enough, that's located within a residential area. And with the signal down, we actually got feedback from the residents who were interested in having that signal removed completely. And so that was on our list to have rebuilt with upgrading with mast arms and such. But we're also now looking at the possibility of putting roundabout there.
All the roadway people love roundabouts. Anyway, all right, well, thank y'all so much. We appreciate it. Feel free to come up to challenge, okay? All right, thanks.
They came up to ask. They're.
Well, we can do another one too.
Well, we could get them all to do one, because I feel like Kelly Crawl, I think whoever really want that.
Interesting.
They just utilize those, it's like.
Good job.
But, yeah, they.
I think
And then
if it's possible, could we leave that for just 1 minute to get like a photo?
Could be.
Oh, with the slide, yeah.
Thanks.
Hey, how you doing? Hey, I'm good. Hey, great.